The next morning, just as Raju was getting ready for his first day at work, there was a soft knock on his door. When he opened it, there stood Amina, dressed in a simple nightgown with a wrapper tied loosely around her waist. The sight of her bare shoulders and body caused Raju's heart to race. "Good morning, Mr. Raju," Amina greeted him with the same sweet smile, her eyes dancing as if she knew exactly what effect she had on him. "Oh, good morning," Raju managed to say, trying to keep his voice steady. "Today is Alhaji's birthday. He asked me to invite you," she said, the smile still on her face. "Oh, okay. I'll be there," Raju replied, trying not to look too eager. "Good. I'll be expecting you," she added, her words sounding almost like a secret meant only for him. Then she left, leaving Raju standing there, his head spinning. Did she mean she herself would be expecting him, or was that just his imagination running wild again? "Guy, get a grip of yourself," he scolded himself, standing by the window. "She's married," he reminded himself. In a small rural town somewhere in West Africa, a bus bounced down the rough road. Raju, a fresh graduate, sat by the window, not feeling too excited. He'd been posted to this place for his first job as a civil servant. City boy through and through, the thought of leaving the excitement and fun of the city for this remote town didn't sit well with him. But he needs the job, especially in this economy. At least, he had one thing sorted out, a place to stay. One of his colleagues had helped him find accommodation. When he arrived, he met his landlord, Alhaji Lawal, a man in his late 50s with eyes sharp enough to cut through metal. The way Alhaji sized him up, Raju wasn't sure if he was being measured for rent or something else. "Are you married?" Alhaji asked, his voice deep and serious. "No, sir. I'm single," Raju replied quickly, worried it might be a problem. Alhaji's eyes continued to scrutinize him. "Good. Very good. I don't like women wala," Alhaji said with a nod. "I don't rent my house to women, and I don't rent to men who have women." Raju blinked in confusion. "Oh, okay, sir." And just like that, Raju moved in. It wasn't long before he noticed that Alhaji, for someone who didn't like women wala, had quite a number of wives. One of them in particular caught Raju's attention, Amina, the youngest of them all. She was strikingly beautiful, far too young for a man like Alhaji. Even though he tried to respect himself, he couldn't help but stare at her. Then she turned and their eyes met. He was so embarrassed, but to his surprise, Amina smiled back. And not just any smile, an inviting, knowing smile that made his heart race. "Guy, calm down. She's someone's wife," he warned himself, trying to push the thoughts aside. The next morning, just as Raju was getting ready for his first day at work, there was a soft knock on his door. When he opened it, there stood Amina, dressed in a simple nightgown with a wrapper tied loosely around her waist. The sight of her bare shoulders and body caused Raju's heart to race. "Good morning, Mr. Raju," Amina greeted him with the same sweet smile, her eyes dancing as if she knew exactly what effect she had on him. "Oh, good morning," Raju managed to say, trying to keep his voice steady. "Today is Alhaji's birthday. He asked me to invite you," she said, the smile still on her face. "Oh, okay. I'll be there," Raju replied, trying not to look too eager. "Good. I'll be expecting you," she added, her words sounding almost like a secret meant only for him. Then she left, leaving Raju standing there, his head spinning. Did she mean she herself would be expecting him, or was that just his imagination running wild again? "Guy, get a grip of yourself," he scolded himself, standing by the window. "She's married," he reminded himself. That day at work, Raju had a lot to do. He didn't know when he worked late into the evening. When he was exhausted, he decided to call it a day and continue the next morning. When he got back home, the compound was lively with music, laughter, and the smell of food. The party was in full swing. Oh no! Today was Alhaji's birthday. He'd been so busy at work and had completely forgotten. Raju felt bad for not bringing a gift. "Oh, Raju, my boy. Alhaji seemed quite happy to see him. "Have you eaten?" he asked. "No. I'm just returning from work," Raju said. "What? You young men, you work too hard," Alhaji said. "They will bring food for you." Outside, the party makers were still in high spirits, drinking and dancing. Raju, now seated, couldn't help but scan his eyes for any sign of Amina. There was no sight of her. Where could she be? "Are you expecting someone?" Alhaji asked with a smile. "Oh no. I'm just enjoying the party." Raju stammered, now really feeling guilty. He'd been thinking about the man's wife. But Alhaji didn't notice his body language. He was more interested in moving his own body to the rhythm of the music as he stepped on the dance floor. Just then, Amina walked out of the house, carrying a food takeaway pack, her smile lighting up her face as she came toward Raju. "Here's your food, Mr. Raju," she said, her voice soft and full of something more than politeness. Raju's heart skipped at the sight of her. "I thought you weren't around," he blurted out, his voice betraying his relief. "I've been busy," she replied, her eyes lingering on his for just a second longer than necessary. As she handed him the takeaway pack, their fingers brushed, and a spark shot through him. Raju saw it in her eyes too, but she quickly excused herself and disappeared inside. Raju wiped his mouth and leaned forward in his chair, completely satisfied. The pounded yam and ewedu had hit the spot, but what really made the meal was the extra chunks of goat meat. He was sure Amina had given him more than the usual portion, maybe even a little special attention with that assorted meat. She was really looking beautiful tonight. It wouldn't be a bad idea to get a glimpse of her before he goes to bed, he thought, trying to convince himself it was no big deal. So Raju quickly washed the food takeaway pack and took it back to Alhaji's house. The party was still going strong, the music blasting and people dancing like they had no plans to stop till morning. It didn't take long for him to spot Amina. She saw him immediately and gave him that same disarming smile. "Oh, Mr. Raju, back for more," she teased, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Raju chuckled nervously. No. I just came to return the takeaway pack." "You didn't have to. I could have come to get it later," she said, her smile deepening. Raju's heart did a little somersault. She would have come to his room at night. What kind of temptation is this? Who even told him to return the stupid takeaway pack? "Are you sure you don't want anything else, Mr. Raju?" Amina asked, but the way she said it made Raju pause. Was she still talking about food? I'm good for now," he stammered, his voice betraying the turmoil in his chest. "Okay then," she said, her eyes still locked on him, playful but loaded with something deeper. After an awkward pause, Raju excused himself and hurried back to his room, his mind buzzing. The moment he lay on his bed, Raju knew it was going to be a long night. He tossed and turned, unable to get Amina out of his head. They were both clearly feeling the same vibe, but this was dangerous territory. She was married to Alhaji. How was he supposed to handle that? Alhaji was no small man in the town. It was well past midnight now, and though the music from the party had grown faint, Raju's restlessness hadn't eased. He regretted not asking for a drink earlier. Maybe alcohol could calm his nerves. Raju went back to the party. They should still have some booze to spare. Moments later, Raju returned to his room with 2 bottles of beer. When he entered the room, the last thing he expected froze him in place. Amina was lying on his bed, wearing only a nightgown, her legs crossed like she had been waiting for him all along. The bottles almost leaped from his grip. Amina stood up, walked over to him, and wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her soft body against his. "I thought you said you didn't want anything else," she whispered, her voice thick with desire. Raju couldn't hold back any longer. He pulled her closer and kissed her deeply, She kissed him back with an urgency that left no doubt in his mind. He scooped her up and carried her to the bed where they gave in to their forbidden passion. The music from the party covered the sound of their whispers and sighs as the night stretched on. By dawn, Amina had slipped out quietly, leaving Raju to wake up to the crowing of the neighborhood cocks. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling with a satisfied grin on his face. What they'd done wasn't right, but it felt too good to regret. As he got ready for work, that same grin hadn't left his face. He felt almost in love, but there was no time to dwell on such thoughts. When he stepped outside, he saw Amina standing with Alhaji and his other wives. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Amina flashed him a quick, mischievous wink. Raju couldn't help but smile back. This girl was playing a risky game, and the thought thrilled him. All the way to work, Raju replayed the events of last night in his head, smiling sheepishly like a schoolboy with a crush. But then, like a shadow creeping over him, a heavy sense of danger settled in his gut. He knew he was playing with fire. Alhaji wasn't the kind of man you messed with, especially when it came to his wives. Raju made up his mind. He was going to end things with Amina, or at least slow it down. Damn. Who sent him this message? When he got home from work, he sat down with a bottle of beer left over from the night before, hoping the cool drink would help him clear his head. Thankfully, he hadn't seen Amina today. That made things easier, allowed him to breathe, and remind himself that last night's affair must not repeat itself. But at around 11 p.m., a faint knock on his door interrupted his peace. He wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened the door, there she was, Amina, standing there with that same disarming smile, dressed in an ungodly outfit. Before he knew it, he had already invited her in, the words about ending things forgotten as quickly as they had come. When they sat down, Amina gave him some bundles of cash. Raju frowned in confusion. It was a lot of money. Where did she even get this from? She wasn't working. She must have gotten this money from Alhaji somehow. I can't take this. I should be the one giving you money, not the other way around, Raju protested, pushing the envelope back toward her. If you refuse my gift, it means you are refusing me, Amina replied, her smile fading into a frown. No, it's not like that. I just don't want you to get into any trouble. And it feels like I'm taking advantage of you, Raju said, genuinely worried. You're not taking advantage of me. I like you, that's why I'm giving you money, she said softly. Unless the feeling isn't mutual, she added, her voice tinged with sadness. Raju panicked. Of course I like you, a lot, he quickly replied. Amina leaned closer, her eyes locked on his. Then prove it, she whispered before her lips met his. All the resolutions he made earlier in the day flew out of his head. As their bodies tangled once again on the bed, Raju knew he was too deep in this to escape easily. And so began their steamy, clandestine affair. Every night, for the next 3 months, Amina would sneak into his room, and each time, she would bring him more money. At first, Raju resisted, but soon he got used to it. After all, with his meager civil servant salary, the extra cash made life a lot easier. But then, one night, she didn't show up. The next night, still no sign of Amina. It was then Raju realized he hadn't seen her for 2 days, not even during the day. Worry crept in. Was she okay? Had something happened to her? Or worse, had their secret been exposed? By the 4th day, Raju couldn't take it anymore. He missed her, plain and simple. He had fallen for her, despite knowing how dangerous that was. He stepped out of his room, determined to go to Alhaji's house and find out what had happened to Amina. He knocked on the door, his heart pounding. To his shock, it was Alhaji who opened the door, his face cold and unreadable. What are you doing here, Raju? Alhaji asked, his voice as sharp as a knife. I came to see Amina. No, I mean, I came to deliver a message, Raju stammered, his mind scrambling for an excuse. A message? Alhaji raised an eyebrow. Yes, she asked me to find out the price of the jam form for her, Raju blurted, even surprising himself with the lie. And how much is it? Alhaji asked, his eyes narrowing. 7,000, sir, Raju replied, his throat dry. Okay. She will hear, Alhaji said before disappearing back into the house, leaving Raju standing there, more confused than ever. At least it seemed like Amina was okay, he thought. That night, Amina finally showed up, but something was off. There was no smile, no playful teasing, and her usual daring outfits were replaced by a plain outfit. Raju's heart sank. What's wrong? He asked, his voice full of concern. I'm pregnant, Raju, Amina said, her voice barely above a whisper. What? Raju froze, his eyes widening in horror. Pregnant. He had gotten his landlord's wife pregnant. Under the same roof. It's okay, Amina said, trying to calm him down. I've thought about this. I'll have the baby for Alhaji. What? No. But isn't the child mine? Raju protested, panic rising in his chest. Alhaji would kill us if he knew, Amina whispered, her voice shaking. We can't run. Even if we try to escape, he will find us, Raju. A cold chill ran down Raju's spine. This wasn't just about their affair anymore. This was life and death. Then let's elope, start a new life together, Raju pleaded. We can't, Amina said, her eyes full of fear. Alhaji has connections everywhere. There's nowhere we can go. Raju felt his world crumbling. This was far beyond anything he had expected. What do we do? He asked, his voice desperate. I'll have the baby, and Alhaji will believe it's his, Amina said, her face wet with tears. But you must leave. I'll give you money. You can start over somewhere far from here. Before Raju could protest, Amina had already left the room, leaving him sitting there in shock, his mind reeling. The next day, at work, Raju received a letter. His transfer request had been approved. 3 months ago, he had applied for this transfer, trying to get away from the rural town, but now it felt like fate was giving him an escape. With a heavy heart, Raju packed his bags and left without saying goodbye to Amina. He refused to take her money. As the bus carried him out of the town, his thoughts were heavy. He was leaving behind a woman he loved and a child he would never know. 1 year passed, and Raju had settled into his new life in the bustling city. He had a better job and things were looking up financially. But not a day went by without thoughts of Amina, or their child. Was it a boy or a girl? He would never know. One day, unable to resist the urge any longer, Raju decided to return to the town. He told himself it was just to visit, just to see if Amina and the child were okay. When he arrived, he was greeted by a shock. The compound was sealed off with police tape. A police officer stopped him at the gate. Sorry, sir, you can't enter. This place is a crime scene, the officer said. What? A crime scene? I used to live here, Raju said, confused. The officer looked at him with pity. Then you must have been one of their victims. Victims? What do you mean? Raju asked, his stomach sinking. The officer explained. Alhaji had been arrested 2 months ago for human trafficking. The compound was a baby factory. His young wives were actually not his wives, but young girls and women he used to produce babies, which he sold off. That's why he only rented his apartments to young, single men. Raju felt like he was going to be sick. His child, had they sold his child? What about the women? Where are they now? Raju asked, his heart pounding. All of them were arrested, except the youngest one. She's the one who tipped off the police, the officer said. Raju's eyes widened. Amina. She had been the one to expose everything. Do you know where I can find her? Raju asked urgently. Why do you want to find her? You should go to the station and give your statement as a victim, the officer said, eyeing him with suspicion. As Raju rode the bus out of town, his thoughts were in turmoil. His mind was set on one thing: he needed to find Amina and, hopefully, their lost child.